Hey there, we're looking at Fortnite running on the Lenovo Legion 5 paired with the RTX 2060 6GB and the i7 1075H. Now this specific Legion actually ended up coming with only 8GB of RAM, and it was just a one stick solution. So I ended up just swapping it in and putting in, 32GB. So 32GB of RAM is what we have to work with here. The performance we're going to be looking at is going to be based off of the graphical presets, but the resolution is always set to 100% resolution scaling. This is important to note just because of the fact that the different presets will sometimes lower the render resolution, sometimes dramatically, which can boost the FPS significantly, but it will destroy your visuals. Now the screen on this laptop is 1080p, so that's what we're going to be running it at, and we're going to be looking at Epic settings. The render API is set to DirectX 11. I did not try 12 just because 12 has given me a lot of issues with Fortnite before. I may re-look at that later, but for right now, DX 11 is what we're going to be rocking. I also do have NVIDIA Reflex on. I don't really know if I can notice a difference or not, but why not just have it on? In general, though, I don't really recommend playing with the Epic settings, and I don't think anybody really is out there suggesting that, just because of the fact that it does impact performance in a noticeable enough way. We're hitting averages that are well above 60, which is fine, but the screen on this laptop is a 240 hertz IPS display. So we have a lot of wasted potential if we're playing at Epic settings. For sure, the performance is decent enough, although I don't like that the 1% lows are going below 60, let alone the refresh rate of the monitor, And I mean, obviously, we're never going to get 1% lows of 240 hertz, but the closer that we are to it, the better of an experience we're going to get. And this is as far away from 240 as you could possibly be. That's a 200 FPS deficit there in the 1% lows. And it is very noticeable because the screen is so smooth that you actually legitimately feel when the FPS is at 40, because it's a noticeable lag compared to just if you're hitting a higher FPS. So for sure, you can get away with playing the game at these settings. You're not going to have like an unplayable experience. I still managed to score pretty decently in this game, but for sure you are better off using any of the other settings. Really, if you care about visuals, dropping down to high is going to get you at least a big enough performance increase to justify going for high instead of, epic, while letting you experience some pretty high FPS and having the visuals stay relatively similar. I really can't tell much of a difference at all visually compared to the epic preset. And that performance uplift is very, very appreciated. We can actually manage to, score some pretty consistent FPS. Those 1% lows at 60 is a good enough uplift that you won't at least want to rip your eyes out. But I really can't help but feel like we're wasting a very, very good screen here with this level of performance here. And I mean, to be clear, you can get away with playing like this. I mean, I ended up winning this game, at these settings. So you can't really say that the game is going to hold you back like this. Really, I think it's medium settings that make this system shine. Once you drop down to medium, those 1% lows go up so significantly. The experience of playing the game is just so much smoother. I mean, we're still not hitting the 240 hertz that the laptop can actually go to, but very rarely are you actually going to be hitting that in any modern games, especially with this GPU and CPU combo. The screen is for sure kind of overkill for this setup, but for like the kind of games that would ever even reach that level of performance anyway, you can actually get away with it. So games like CSGO and Valorant, they'd be able to actually do it, but Fortnite is just one of those games where about 140 is what you should be expecting. And honestly, at that level, it's really good. I think medium settings is the way to go with this. At the low settings, you really sacrifice a lot of the visuals, and that could be perfectly fine for you. I mean, I know a lot of people that play these kinds of competitive games like to have the visuals as minimal as possible, but the performance uplift that you gain from this is just not significant enough to justify, at least to me, the visual degradation. I think medium just hits that sweet spot of visuals and performance to really just win out over the low settings. The low settings kind of just seem like, unless you're going to be like an ultra sweat lord about it, it really isn't going to matter too much. With that being said, we are hitting averages that are significantly closer to the 240 hertz of this display, but we're still not there yet, and we're never going to reach it, really. I mean, there will be situations where we get into the 200s, but it'll be for just a couple of seconds. You know, we're inside right here, we're reaching the 200s, but it's such a narrow situation. You very rarely are going to be doing that. Another thing to note is that the 1% lows were consistently lower. And it happened because every time I test, these graphics settings, I do 3 games and, kind of get an average from there. Any outliers, I kind of just like remove out of there. But no, it was consistently like lower than than at the medium preset. And I'm not 100% sure why, but it is something that occurred, but the averages were just completely different. Like this for sure is hitting higher averages, but it's just at a level that I just don't think it's noticeable. I think you're going to be happier playing at medium settings for the most part. And you're going to have a great experience, especially if you have the version of this laptop with that 240 hertz display. I think that might have been like a Walmart exclusive, but the performance per dollar was actually significant because the screen is fantastic. The performance in the games that I want to play is really, really good, and it really complements the screen. Obviously, again, we're not hitting the screen, averages 240. Very rarely are we going to hit that, but again, for games like Valorant, you are going to be hitting that, and it's going to be a pretty fun experience. But for this game, I would say just stick to medium unless you really like the very reduced visuals of the low settings, which I can understand getting used to them and how it makes it a lot easier to see things. But I think Fortnite is one of those games where a lot of it is the spectacle and the kind of crazy nature of the fact that like every media franchise seems to be merged into one. So having at least a base level of decent visuals can just add a lot to the experience. But if you want to maximize your FPS average, for sure go with the low settings.